Today's story is called A Basket for My Brother. It's a story about a baby named Moses and how he was saved from death. Today we'll see how a family's faith in God's protection can keep a loved one safe from harm. If you'd like to follow in your book, turn to page 22. Now, before we start today's story, I want you to think about a time when your faith in God helped somebody else. Can you think of a time like that? Well, I know one time when somebody else's faith in God sure helped me. When I was in junior high school, I went on a retreat with a whole bunch of my friends. Our whole youth group went up to the mountains in Beersheba Springs, right outside Nashville, up in the Smoky Mountains. We had a wonderful weekend, but on the bus ride on the way home, I started having a little trouble breathing. I just thought maybe I was tired, maybe I didn't get enough sleep, but every time I tried to take a deep breath, way down in my chest hurt. I didn't want to tell anybody because we were headed home and I thought I would just talk to Mom and Dad when I got home. By the time I got back to my house, even a little breath hurt. I told my dad about it and we went down to Parkview Hospital and he took some x-rays of my chest. Well, down in the bottom corner of my right lung, it looked a little funny on the x-ray and he said, Aim, I've seen this before. This might be a little touch of pleurisy. Well, I didn't know what pleurisy was. I just knew that it hurt. I just knew it hurt to breathe. It hurt to sit down. It hurt to lie down. Oh, it just hurt. And we went home, and I just didn't know what I was going to do. I went up to my bedroom, and my dad came up about 20 minutes later. I was standing in the corner of my room because I couldn't manage to lie down. And I remember thinking, Daddy, I've been in here praying, and this is not getting any better. Somehow, when I prayed and nothing happened immediately, I lost faith. I thought maybe God didn't hear me. Anyway, my dad had known Jesus for a lot longer than I had. And somehow, being his youngest daughter, when Daddy said something was going to happen, I just always knew it was going to happen. So he came over where I was standing in the corner, and he put his hands on my shoulders. And this time, my father asked God to make my lung better. And you know what? Somehow, I just felt like he had a direct line that I didn't have yet. Even though I did have it, I believed my dad's faith. And this might sound crazy to you, but after we stood there for just a few minutes, the pain in my lungs subsided. I was so thankful to have my dad. I was so glad because when I lost hope, he came in with strong, fresh hope. Isn't it wonderful how one person's faith can help other people? Now let's hear what happened long ago to a baby named Moses. He had a sister named Miriam, just about your age. How excited I was. I had a new brother. Mother wrapped him in strips of cloth and placed him in my arms. His fingers were so tiny. I can hardly wait to show him to my friends, I said. Miriam, my father's voice was stern. You know what will happen if the Egyptians find out we have a baby boy in this house. They will take him and kill him. We must keep him hidden. When he cries, you must quiet him quickly. No one must know he's here. At first it was easy. His small voice could not be heard outside the house. Much of the time he slept. But as the days passed, his voice grew stronger and he stayed awake more. Finally one day Mother said, Miriam, we can't hide your brother anymore. He's getting too big. Your father and I have a plan, but you must help. As Mother explained the plan to me, Father cut armloads of reeds that grew along the riverbank. From them, Mother wove a small basket and covered it inside and out with tar and pitch so it wouldn't leak. It was like a tiny little boat, just large enough to hold my brother. Gently, Mother placed him inside. We walked down to the Nile River to the spot where the Egyptian princess always came to bathe. There, Mother set the basket in the river. I hid and waited. Soon, I heard the laughing voices of the princess and her servants as they came down the path. Just as they got to the edge of the river, my little brother began to cry. The princess stopped. What's that in the water? Get it for me, she said to one of her servants. The girl waded into the water and picked up the basket. Now my brother was really crying. The princess peeked inside. Look, it's one of the Hebrew babies, she said. Gently, she picked up my brother and held him close to quiet him. I ran from my hiding place and bowed before the princess. Would you like for me to get one of the Hebrew women to take care of the baby for you, I asked. Well, yes, she said. Go and get one. I ran as fast as I could to Mother, who was waiting for me. He's safe. "Come quickly," I said, taking her by the hand. Mother and I hurried back to the princess, who was holding the baby in her arms. The princess turned to Mother. "Take this baby and care for him. I'll pay you for your work." Mother was so happy. Our plan had worked. My brother, whom the princess would later name Moses, was safe, and we could care for him and watch him grow. God had taken care of our family. Well, that's the story of A Basket for My Brother. Today's Bible story is called A Giant for the King. It's a story about a young shepherd boy named David who took on Goliath and the whole Philistine army. It shows that no matter how small you are, when you trust God, big things can happen. If you'd like to follow in your book, turn to page 40. Now, before we start today's story, I want you to think about a time that God used you and your ability for His glory. Can you think of a time? You know, when I was 15 years old, I started writing songs. I didn't write them for anybody to hear in particular. I just wrote them because when I was alone in my room with my guitar, I just felt like writing. For months and months, I just sang those songs just to myself, sometimes to my family. You know, one night I was in my room and I thought, you know, God, I don't play my guitar very well, and I don't sing every note on key, but I'm going to a high school right now where there are a lot of kids that don't know you. Well, I decided that I would go to the principal and ask her if I could do an assembly program. I was scared to death. I was a sophomore in high school. I was 15 years old. And the next morning, I marched myself into the principal's office and I said, "Ms. McMurray, I'd like to do an assembly program for the girls here at Harpeth Hall." Well, to my knowledge and to her knowledge, none of the kids had ever done an assembly program like that. But she said, "Amy, if you think you can do it, go right ahead." So I got my guitar, and for about 4 weeks, I worked on every chord I could possibly play. I learned songs I'd never known. I wrote as many as I could. And then one morning, I got up in front of 400 students, scared to death. And I prayed that God would give me the strength to sing songs about Him so I could tell my friends what Jesus had done in my life. It only lasted 30 minutes. I think I squeezed about 15 songs into 30 minutes. And afterwards, you know, I didn't even care that I'd not hit all the right notes. It didn't seem to matter that I'd messed up on the guitar. I felt like God had given me a gift to sing. And for the first time, I knew what it felt like to use that gift to communicate with other people. Later on that day, one of the girls that was a senior in high school stuck a note in one of my books. When I opened the note, she had written, "You know, Amy, I have always known what it's like to feel popular. I've always known acceptance, but deep inside, I've always felt a little bit empty. And today, for the first time, I think I found a way that my heart could be full." I couldn't believe it. I was a squirt. I was a sophomore, and here she was a senior, and something that I had done had affected her. You know, that was 10 years ago. And if I had known back then that I would be singing for thousands of people as a 25-year-old, I would have been scared stiff. But that night before I went in to talk to the principal at my school, I prayed, "God, if you gave me the ability to sing, help me use it to your glory." And He did. He kept His promise. So you see, God can take any talent or ability, no matter how small, and turn it into something big for Him. Now let's hear about a boy who did just that long ago. His name was David. It isn't easy being the youngest in the family, especially when you have 7 brothers. I've always been little David. Well, I'm a teenager now, and I can do important things too. That's why my father sent me to take grain and bread to my 3 brothers. They were fighting in a war against the Philistines. When I got to the camp, I heard yelling and shouting. Soldiers were running everywhere. To see what was happening, I climbed over some rocks and looked into the valley below. I could hardly believe it. There in a field stood a mean-looking giant. He was huge. A great bronze helmet covered his head, and he wore shiny metal armor. Even his legs were covered. He had a long, pointed stick hanging over his back and a huge spear in his powerful hands. There he stood, making fun of the army of God. "Why don't you send someone out to fight me?" he yelled. "If he can kill me, the Philistines will be your servants. If I win, then Israel will be our slaves. I, Goliath, challenge you." "Who's going to fight him?" I asked the commander. "King Saul has offered a great reward to anyone who will fight the giant, but no one has tried," he replied. "I'll fight him," I said, and in a few moments I was surprised to find myself talking with the king. "But you're just a boy. Goliath has been a soldier all his life," said the king. "I may be young, but I can fight," I answered. "Once, when I was watching over our sheep, I killed a bear and a lion that tried to get the lambs. The Lord protected me then, and I know he'll protect me from that ugly Philistine." "Then you must wear my armor," said the king. However, King Saul was a very big man. I could hardly lift his long, heavy sword, and his armor swallowed me. The helmet covered my face. I couldn't even see where I was going. "I can't wear all this. I don't know how to use such things," I said. I didn't need a king's armor. I already had a plan. My hands were shaking a little as I picked up my shepherd's stick and my slingshot. I walked down to the stream where I picked up 5 smooth stones, and I put them in my bag. At close range, Goliath looked even larger than before. I knew I had to be brave and asked God to help me. When Goliath saw me, he began to yell, "What's this? You're just a kid." He looked at my shepherd's stick. "Do you think I'm some dog? You're going to beat me with a stick?" "You've come out to fight me with your spear and sword," I said, "but I've come to fight you in the name of God. He will help me to win. Then all the world will know about the God of Israel." Angrily, Goliath began moving toward me. I took one of the stones from my bag, put it in the sling, and whirled it over my head. The stone whooshed through the air. There was a thud. The stone had struck Goliath's forehead. He crashed to the ground. I ran over to him, grabbed his own sword, and killed him. When the Philistines saw that he was dead, they turned and ran. Israel was safe again. God had protected me. He had used me, a young boy, with just a stone and a slingshot to defeat a giant. But with God on my side, that was all I needed. And that's the story of A Giant for the King.